I stood in the hallway, outside courtroom 3B, at the Ontario Superior Court, watching my son Michael adjust his silk tie through the glass window. He was 42 now, with the same sharp jawline I'd had at his age, but there was something harder in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there when I'd taught him how to read blueprints in my construction office 20 years ago. His lawyer, Robert Henshaw, leaned in close to whisper something, and Michael laughed. Actually, laughed. I recognized that laugh. It was the same one he'd used at Christmas dinner 6 months ago when he'd first suggested I was losing it in front of the whole family. The same laugh when he told my grandchildren their grandfather couldn't be trusted with important decisions anymore. My own lawyer, Sarah Chen, touched my elbow gently. "Mr. Morrison, are you ready?" I nodded, feeling the weight of the manila envelope in my jacket pocket. The envelope that contained 3 words I planned to say at the right moment. Just 3 words. But I knew those words would make Robert Henshaw's confident smile disappear faster than snow in April. "Let's get this over with," I said. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Oak paneling, harsh fluorescent lights, and about 30 empty seats behind the bar. Michael had already taken his position at the plaintiff's table, his expensive suit probably costing more than what I used to pay my best foremen for a month's work. Robert sat beside him, organizing papers with the kind of theatrical precision designed to intimidate. I took my seat beside Sarah and immediately felt the weight of my son's stare. When I looked up, he didn't look away. Instead, he gave me that same pitying expression he'd been wearing for months. The poor old dad doesn't understand what's happening, look. The bailiff called us to order, and Justice Margaret Henderson entered. She was a woman in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that came from 30 years of hearing people lie in her courtroom. "We're here today regarding the petition filed by Michael Morrison," she began, glancing at her notes. "Mr. Morrison seeks to have his father, James Morrison, declared mentally incompetent and to gain conservatorship over his estate and business holdings. Is that correct?" Robert Henshaw stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. We appreciate the court's time today. This is a difficult matter for the family, but we believe it's necessary for James Morrison's own protection." I almost laughed at that. Protection. That's what he was calling it. "Mr. Morrison," the judge looked at me. "You understand the nature of these proceedings?" "I do, Your Honor." My voice was steady. 68 years old, and I could still project across a room when I needed to. "Very well. Mr. Henshaw, you may call your first witness." Robert smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he'd already won. The petitioner calls Dr. Raymond Walsh. I watched as a man in his 50s took the stand. Dr. Walsh was a psychiatrist, apparently. Michael had brought me to see him 3 months ago, claiming it was just a routine checkup. I thought it was strange at the time that Michael insisted on being in the room for the whole appointment, but I'd assumed my son was just being concerned. Now I understood what had really been happening. "Dr. Walsh," Robert began, pacing in front of the witness stand like he was performing for a jury that wasn't there. "You examined James Morrison on September 15th of this year. Can you tell the court what you found?" Dr. Walsh opened a folder. "I conducted a standard cognitive assessment. Mr. Morrison showed signs of memory impairment, difficulty with complex decision-making, and some confusion regarding recent events." I felt Sarah tense beside me. She leaned over and whispered, "He's setting the foundation." Robert continued, "In your professional opinion, is James Morrison capable of managing a multi-million-dollar construction business and making sound financial decisions?" Dr. Walsh hesitated for just a moment. Just long enough for me to notice. "Based on my examination, I have concerns about his capacity to handle complex business matters without assistance." "Thank you, doctor." Robert turned back to his table with that same satisfied smile. No further questions. Sarah stood for cross-examination. She was young, maybe 35, but she had the sharp focus of someone who'd grown up having to fight for everything. I'd hired her specifically because she reminded me of myself 40 years ago. "Dr. Walsh, how long was your examination of Mr. Morrison?" "Approximately 45 minutes. And during that time, Mr. Morrison's son was present in the room the entire time?" "Yes." Did you find that unusual? A 68-year-old man needing his son present for a private medical examination? Dr. Walsh shifted slightly. The son requested to be present. I didn't object. Did Mr. Morrison request his son be there? I don't recall him specifically requesting it, no. Sarah nodded slowly. And these signs of confusion you mentioned, can you give specific examples? Dr. Walsh flipped through his notes. He couldn't recall the exact date of a business meeting that had occurred several weeks prior. He seemed uncertain about recent financial transactions. Did you verify whether these meetings or transactions actually occurred? Or did you simply accept that Mr. Morrison should have remembered them? I based my assessment on the standards, tests, and observations. Observations influenced by information provided by the son who stood to benefit from your diagnosis. Objection, Robert called out. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Henderson said, but I could see her making a note. Sarah pressed on. Dr. Walsh, did you conduct any follow-up examinations? No. Did you review Mr. Morrison's medical history from his primary physician? I was provided with some background by the family. By Michael Morrison specifically? Another hesitation. Yes. Sarah let that hang in the air for a moment before sitting down. No further questions. Robert called 3 more witnesses over the next hour. An accountant who testified about irregularities in the company books that I'd supposedly authorized. A former employee who claimed I'd been confused during meetings. And then my own daughter-in-law, Michael's wife, Patricia. Patricia took the stand wearing all black, like she was already at my funeral. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before Robert even started asking questions. Mrs. Morrison, Robert said gently, this must be difficult for you. It is, Patricia said, her voice breaking just slightly. I love my father-in-law. We all do. But we're worried about him. Can you describe some instances that concerned you? Patricia nodded. Last Thanksgiving, he forgot several of our family members' names. At Christmas, he gave my daughter Emily the same present twice, like he didn't remember he'd already given her one. And then in January, he called Michael at 3 a.m, completely disoriented, claiming someone had broken into his house. I remembered that night. There had been someone trying to break into my house. The police had come, found tool marks on my back door, but apparently, in Patricia's version of events, I'd imagined the whole thing. And the business, Robert prompted. Did you observe any concerning behavior there? Michael would come home devastated, Patricia said. His father had made decisions without consulting anyone. Contracts signed with unfamiliar companies. Money transferred to accounts Michael didn't recognize. It was clear something was wrong. Sarah's cross-examination was brief. Mrs. Morrison, your husband stands to inherit a significant amount if he gains control of his father's assets, correct? This isn't about money, Patricia said quickly. Too quickly. I didn't ask what it was about. I asked if your husband would benefit financially. Yes or no? Patricia's jaw tightened. Yes, eventually. But that's not why we're doing this. Of course not, Sarah said, her tone making it clear she didn't believe that for a second. No further questions? Finally, Robert called Michael to the stand. My son walked up there with his head held high, like he was the victim in all this. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. I wondered if he even remembered what truth meant anymore. Michael, Robert began, using his first name to establish familiarity. Tell the court about your relationship with your father. He was my hero growing up, Michael said, and I could hear the practiced emotion in his voice. He built Morrison Construction from nothing, taught me everything about the business. I always thought I'd take it over someday, work alongside him, maybe eventually run it when he was ready to retire. And what changed? Michael's expression shifted to concern. About a year ago, I started noticing things. Small stuff at first. He'd forget meetings, make decisions that didn't make sense. But then it got worse. He'd signed contracts without reading them. He transferred $200,000 to a vendor we'd never used before. Wouldn't explain why. When I questioned him, he'd get defensive, angry, accused me of trying to steal from him. That must have been painful. It was. Michael looked right at me. Because I love my father. But I can't watch him destroy everything he built. And I can't let him put our employees' livelihoods at risk because he's not capable of running the company anymore. Robert nodded sympathetically. Why do you believe you should be granted conservatorship? Because I've been working at Morrison Construction for 20 years. I know the business inside and out. I've been handling most of the day-to-day operations anyway. And because someone needs to protect my father from himself before it's too late. Thank you, Michael. No further questions? Judge Henderson looked at Sarah. Cross-examination? Sarah stood, and I saw something flicker across Michael's face. Not quite fear, but close to it. He'd underestimated her before. I could tell he was realizing that might have been a mistake. Mr. Morrison, Sarah began, you said you've been handling most of the day-to-day operations. For how long? The last 6 months or so. And during that time, has the company's profitability increased or decreased? Michael hesitated. There have been some challenges in the market. I didn't ask about market challenges. I asked about profitability. Yes or no? It's decreased. By how much? I don't have the exact figures. Sarah picked up a document. According to the company's quarterly reports, profitability has decreased by 18% since you took over daily operations. Is that accurate? Like I said, market challenges, yes or no, Mr. Morrison? Yes. Sarah paused, letting that sink in. Now, you mentioned a $200,000 transfer to an unfamiliar vendor. Did you investigate which vendor that was? My father wouldn't tell me. Did you check the company records yourself? He had passwords changed. Locked me out of certain accounts. Locked you out, Sarah repeated. Or did he restrict your access because he'd noticed discrepancies that concerned him? Objection, Robert jumped up. Counsel is speculating. Sustained. But Sarah had made her point. Mr. Morrison, isn't it true that you approached your father 6 months ago with a proposal to sell Morrison Construction to Apex Development Group? Michael's expression went carefully neutral. I presented it as an option to consider. And your father rejected it? He didn't think it was the right time. And 2 weeks after that rejection, you took him to Dr. Walsh for his routine checkup? That's not related, isn't it? Sarah's voice was sharp now. Isn't it true that Apex Development Group offered you a position as regional director if the sale went through? A position worth significantly more than your current salary. The courtroom went very quiet. That was discussed, Michael admitted. But it wasn't the reason. And isn't it true, Sarah continued, that Robert Henshaw, your attorney, was your roommate at University of Toronto? That you've been friends for over 20 years? Robert stood up. Your Honor, counsel is implying. I'm not implying anything, Sarah cut him off. I'm establishing that this entire proceeding may have been orchestrated by 2 old friends who stand to benefit financially from taking control of James Morrison's assets. That's outrageous! Robert's face had gone red. Judge Henderson banged her gavel. Counsel, approach the bench. While Sarah and Robert argued in hushed tones with the judge, I caught Michael's eye. He was staring at me with something I couldn't quite read. Anger? Fear? Maybe both. After a tense minute, Sarah and Robert returned to their seats. We'll take a 15-minute recess, Judge Henderson announced. When we return, the defense will present its case. The moment the judge left, Robert leaned over to Michael, whispering urgently. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Michael's expression growing more concerned by the second. Sarah touched my arm. That went well. We've established doubt about their motives. But I need to ask you something. What? You told me you had evidence. Proof that Michael has been embezzling from the company. Where is it? I patted my jacket pocket, feeling the envelope. Right here. Why haven't you given it to me yet? Because I want to see his face when I present it. I want everyone in this room to see what my son really is. Sarah looked concerned. Mr. Morrison, that's not how we should. Trust me, I said quietly. I built a $40 million company from a single pickup truck and a toolbox. I know how to handle this. When court resumed, Sarah called her first witness, my primary care physician, Dr. Ellen Kowalski. She testified that I was in excellent health, both physically and mentally, that I'd shown no signs of cognitive decline in any of our appointments. Then came James Thornton, my CFO for 15 years, who testified that I'd been sharp and decisive in all our meetings, that any confusion Michael had reported didn't match his observations. Finally, Sarah called me to the stand. I walked up there, feeling every one of my 68 years, but also feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. This was it. This was where everything would come out. Sarah took me through my background, how I'd started Morrison Construction in 1979 with one crew, how I'd grown it through contracts with the city, then private developers, then major corporations, how I'd built a reputation for quality work and honest dealing that made Morrison Construction one of the most respected firms in Toronto. "Mr. Morrison," Sarah said, "your son claims you've been making poor decisions, transferring money without explanation, signing questionable contracts. How do you respond to these allegations?" "I've been investigating him," I said simply. The courtroom went dead silent. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Sarah asked, though she'd heard me perfectly well. I said I've been investigating my son for the past 8 months. Michael's face had gone pale. Robert leaned over, whispering urgently, but Michael wasn't listening. He was staring at me. "Can you elaborate on that?" Sarah prompted. "Last spring, I noticed some irregularities in our accounts. Small amounts at first. A few thousand here and there being transferred to a numbered account. Then it got bigger, much bigger. What did you do?" "I hired a forensic accountant, quietly. Had him review everything going back 2 years. And I installed software on the company's servers that tracked all transactions and email communications." Robert was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. If the defendant had evidence of wrongdoing, it should have been disclosed. Your client filed for conservatorship, claiming I'm mentally incompetent," I said, looking right at the judge. "I'd like to present evidence proving not only that I'm perfectly competent, but that this entire proceeding is a fraud designed to prevent me from exposing my son's embezzlement." The courtroom erupted. Judge Henderson banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order," she pointed at me. "Mr. Morrison, do you have this evidence with you?" I pulled the envelope from my pocket. "Yes, Your Honor. Bank records, email exchanges, and video recordings from my office security cameras, all proving that my son has been systematically stealing from Morrison Construction and that he concocted this entire conservatorship scheme to prevent me from going to the police." Michael was shaking his head. "That's not true. Dad, you're confused." "Confused?" I opened the envelope and pulled out a printed email. "This is from you to Robert Henshaw, dated 6 months ago. And I quote, 'We need to move on the old man before he figures it out. If we can get him declared incompetent, I can sell to Apex and bury the evidence. The conservatorship is our best play.'" The silence that followed was absolute. Robert's confident smile had vanished completely. His face had gone gray. He looked like he might be sick. That was taken out of context," he managed. "Really?" I pulled out another document. "How about the bank records showing you've been receiving monthly payments from Michael for the past year? Payments that coincidentally started the same month the embezzlement did?" Judge Henderson's expression was thunderous. "Mr. Henshaw, is this true?" Robert looked at Michael, then back at the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess to consult with my client." "Denied." "Mr. Morrison, approach the bench with that evidence. Now." I walked up and handed her the envelope. She spent the next 5 minutes reviewing the contents, her expression growing darker with each page. Finally, she looked up at Michael and Robert. "Gentlemen, you will remain in this courtroom. Bailiff, contact the Crown Attorney's office immediately. I believe we may be looking at fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy charges." Michael finally found his voice. "Dad, please. I can explain everything. It's not what it looks like." I turned to face my son, the boy I'd taught to swing a hammer, the teenager I'd brought to job sites every summer, the young man I'd groomed to take over the company someday. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said quietly. "You got greedy. You and your friend Robert thought you could sell my company out from under me, pocket the money, and have me declared insane to cover your tracks. But you forgot something, Michael. You forgot that I built Morrison Construction by being careful, by paying attention to details, by never trusting anyone completely." "That's not fair," Michael said. and I could hear desperation creeping into his voice. I worked for that company my entire adult life. You deserved what I chose to give you, which would have been the whole company eventually, if you'd been patient, if you'd been honest. But you couldn't wait, could you? You wanted it now. You wanted the sale to Apex, the big payout, the fancy title. Patricia was crying in the gallery. Michael's face had crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to cry when he skinned his knee. But that little boy was gone, had been gone for a long time, probably. I'd just been too blind to see it. Mr. Morrison, Judge Henderson said, I'm dismissing this petition immediately. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Crown Attorney for criminal investigation. Mr. Henshaw, you will surrender your phone and any computers you used in communications with Michael Morrison. Michael Morrison, you are hereby ordered to surrender your access to all Morrison construction accounts and facilities pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. As the bailiff moved to secure Robert and Michael, my son turned to me one last time. Was it worth it? Destroying your own family? I didn't destroy our family, son. You did that all by yourself. 3 months later, I sat in my office at Morrison Construction headquarters, reviewing the blueprints for a new condo development project. The company had survived the scandal, though it had taken some work to rebuild trust with clients and employees. Michael had pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud. He'd gotten 5 years, though he'd likely serve less than 3 with good behavior. Robert Henshaw had been disbarred and received a similar sentence. Patricia had filed for divorce. She'd taken the kids and moved back to Vancouver. I'd tried to maintain a relationship with my grandchildren, but Patricia made it difficult. Maybe in time, that would change. My daughter Rachel, who lived in Montreal with her husband, had called me every week since the trial. She'd been horrified by what Michael had done, supportive of my decision to expose him. You did the right thing, Dad, she kept saying. I know it hurts, but you did the right thing. I wanted to believe that. The truth was more complicated. Yes, Michael had stolen from me. Yes, he'd tried to have me declared incompetent to cover his crimes. Yes, he deserved to face consequences for his actions. But he was still my son. And there were nights I woke up wondering if I could have handled things differently, if I could have confronted him privately, given him a chance to make things right before involving the courts. But then I remembered his face in that courtroom, the way he'd laughed with Robert Henshaw, the way Patricia had lied on the stand about me being confused and forgetful, the way they'd all been so confident they could take everything from me. No, I'd made the right choice. Sometimes you have to choose between family and justice, between blood and principle. I'd spent my whole life building something worth having, teaching my children that honesty and hard work mattered, that integrity meant more than money. If Michael had forgotten those lessons, then it was on him to remember them the hard way. Sarah Chen knocked on my office door. Mr. Morrison, there's someone here to see you. A young woman in her 20s stepped into the office. She had Michael's eyes, my late wife's smile. My granddaughter, Emily. Hi, Grandpa, she said quietly. I stood up, not quite believing what I was seeing. Emily, what are you doing here? Does your mother know you're... I'm 23 years old. I don't need Mom's permission to visit my grandfather. She came forward and hugged me, and I felt something tight in my chest finally loosen. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see what Dad was doing. I should have known something was wrong. This isn't your fault. I know. But I also know what he did was horrible. And I know Mom won't let you see Matthew and Sophie. But I wanted you to know that not everyone in the family thinks you're the bad guy here. What you did took guts. And I'm proud to be your granddaughter. I had to sit down then, because my legs suddenly felt weak. Thank you, I managed. You have no idea how much that means. Emily smiled. Actually, I was hoping you might need an intern this summer. I'm studying construction management at Ryerson, and I'd really like to learn the family business from someone who actually built it, instead of just inheriting it. I looked at her, this young woman who had her grandfather's determination and her grandmother's compassion, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope, When can you start? That evening, I drove back to my house in the Beaches neighborhood, where I'd lived for 30 years. The same house where Patricia claimed I'd imagined a break-in. The same house where I'd raised Michael and Rachel. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the back deck, watching the sunset over Lake Ontario. The past few months had cost me my son, my daughter-in-law, and 2 of my grandchildren, at least for now. They'd cost me countless sleepless nights and more heartache than I'd thought possible. But they'd also taught me something important, that sometimes the hardest choice is the right choice. That integrity matters more than comfort. That you can't build anything lasting on a foundation of lies, whether it's a building or a family. Michael had forgotten that. He'd thought he could take shortcuts, make his own rules, and everything would work out because he was my son. He'd been wrong, and now he'd have 5 years to think about that mistake. I raised my glass to the setting sun, to the company I'd built, to the granddaughter who'd chosen integrity over family loyalty. To doing the right thing, I said quietly, even when it costs you everything. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow I'd be back in the office, building something new. Today, I allowed myself to mourn what I'd lost. Both could be true. Both were necessary. That's what it meant to be a Morrison. We built things to last. We told the truth. We paid the price. And we never, ever compromised on what was right. Even when it broke our hearts,